All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into Venezuela, a nation sitting on the world's largest oil reserves that somehow managed to completely collapse. And it all ends with this wild military intervention that honestly feels like something straight out of a Hollywood movie.
So, this really is the central question, isn't it? I mean, how does a country that's literally sitting on more oil than Saudi Arabia just completely fall apart? It's a puzzle that really sets the stage for everything that comes next.
And get this, it's not just an economic story. It turns into a full-blown geopolitical thriller that ends with this unbelievable scene: the U.S. military moving in to capture a sitting head of state. So that's exactly where we're going to jump in, right at the climax.
Okay, let's start with the intervention itself. Because back in January 2026, the crisis in Venezuela just exploded onto the world stage in a way that, frankly, nobody saw coming.
I mean, just look at how fast this all went down. In the early hours of January 3rd, U.S. Special Forces kick off Operation Absolute Resolve. By that afternoon, President Maduro is captured. Just a day later, he's on a plane to the U.S. to face charges. And by the 5th, his own vice president is taking over. We're talking less than 3 days. A sovereign nation's leader is just gone, removed by an outside power. It's incredible.
So what was the official reason for all this? Well, the U.S. administration at the time was very careful not to call it an invasion or, an act of war. Instead, they framed it as this massive law enforcement action. The argument was, hey, we're not targeting a country here. We're targeting a criminal network that has basically hijacked the entire Venezuelan government.
And this quote from the U.S. president at the time, wow. It really tells you everything you need to know about the sheer scope of this plan. See, the goal wasn't just to grab Maduro. It was for the United States to literally run Venezuela, at least for a while. That is a massive declaration of intent. We're talking about directly overseeing the entire political transition of another country.
But here's the thing. For an intervention like this to even be on the table, a country has to be brought to its absolute knees first. So how did Venezuela, a nation just swimming in oil, get to that point of total ruin?
I mean, the change here is just staggering. It's hard to even wrap your head around. On one hand, you had Venezuela as an oil powerhouse, one of the richest nations in Latin America. For decades, right, that oil money funded everything: infrastructure, social programs, you name it. And then there's the now, a state of almost total collapse. When the oil prices crashed and, mismanagement really took over, the whole system just broke. We're talking chronic shortages of food, medicine, a power grid so fragile that nationwide blackouts became a regular thing.
Okay, this number is really at the heart of the whole economic catastrophe: 1,600,000%. That's not just inflation. That's hyperinflation on a scale that's, it's almost impossible to imagine. Basically, the government just kept printing money to pay its bills, and in doing so, made their own currency totally worthless. Think about it. Money you earned in the morning could be worth practically nothing by the afternoon. Your entire life savings? Wiped out. Gone. The very idea of money just evaporated.
Now, this kind of economic implosion, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It went hand in hand with a political system that was also completely falling apart, creating what was basically a full-blown democracy in crisis.
And the 2024 presidential election, that was really the tipping point. So you've got the opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, who says, hey, we won. Here are the numbers to prove it. And he's got a lot of foreign governments backing him up. But on the other side, the government, which controls all the official channels, just declares the incumbent, Nicolas Maduro, the winner. All of a sudden, you have two different people claiming to be the legitimate president. The country was just fractured right down the middle, with absolutely no clear path forward.
So, with its legitimacy in tatters after that election, what does the government do? It tightens its grip. Hard. Human rights groups started documenting this awful pattern of repression. People being detained for no reason, political opponents being tortured, even extrajudicial killings. Suddenly, just speaking out against the government became something that could get you killed.
So, what happens when a country's economy completely fails and its political system just collapses? Well, the result is what you'd expect: a human catastrophe on an absolutely epic scale.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Just ask yourself, what would it take for you to leave everything behind, your home, your family, your entire life, and just walk into the total unknown? Well, for almost 8 million people, the situation in Venezuela was the answer to that question.
And that answer is this number right here, 7.9 million.
That is not just a statistic. That's one of the largest human displacement crises in modern history, right up there with what we saw in Syria. And every single one of those numbers is a person, a family, a life just shattered by hunger and desperation.
But here's the twist. Getting rid of Maduro, that wasn't the end of the story, not even close. It was actually the beginning of a brand new and deeply uncertain chapter with consequences that would ripple all across the globe.
So instead of bringing stability, the U.S. intervention kicked off this new, incredibly chaotic reality. Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, takes over, backed by the military. At the same time, U.S. forces are seizing control of the oil industry, the country's lifeline. And on the ground, you've got these armed pro-government militias, the colectivos, being sent out to crush any dissent. On top of all that, a media blackout is declared. It was chaos.
And as you can probably guess, the rest of the world was immediately split right down familiar geopolitical lines. The U.S. obviously defended its actions, pointing to narco-terrorism, but its biggest rivals, Russia and China, they condemned it. They called it a flagrant violation of international law and a country's sovereignty. And then you had a whole bunch of other nations in Latin America and Europe who were just deeply concerned. They saw this as a really dangerous precedent that could just make the whole region even more unstable.
So you might be asking, why? Why all this intense focus from global superpowers on this one country? Well, it always comes back to this number, $303 billion. That's the number of barrels of proven oil reserves in Venezuela. It is the largest on Earth. The fate of Venezuela is completely tied to the world's energy security, and that right there is why its crisis is everybody's business.
And all of this leaves us right here with one of the toughest questions in all of international relations. When a nation completely collapses, who has the right to step in? It's a question about sovereignty, sure, but also about the responsibility to protect people from disaster. And what happens when the old rules of the world just don't seem to apply anymore? There are, as you can imagine, no easy answers.
For the longest time, we thought we knew what made a country powerful, right? Big armies, massive weapons. But what if the true measure of strength today is completely invisible? That's what we're digging into, how the battle for the future isn't being fought with bombs anymore, but with bits and bytes. This is all about silicon supremacy.
Think back to the Cold War. The whole game was about one thing: nuclear stockpiles. That was the equation for power. Simple. But the microchip? Man, it has completely flipped that script. The race for computational supremacy is the new arms race, and it's happening right now, whether we see it or not.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to throw out the old definition of power. Seriously, the playbook that was written during the Cold War, it's pretty much useless now. Yeah, for decades, this was it. This was the ultimate symbol of power. A nation's influence was literally measured in megatons. It was kind of terrifyingly simple, wasn't it? The more warheads you had, the more power you held. Period. But today, the game is measured in petaflops. And you're probably thinking, what on earth is a petaflop? Well, it's a mind-boggling unit of processing speed. We're talking 1 quadrillion calculations every single second. To put that into perspective, it would take you, with a calculator, over 30 million years to do what a 1 petaflop computer does in just 1 second. And this isn't just about being fast. It's about the ability to think, to predict, and to act faster than anyone else. That's the new benchmark for dominance. So if this is a new kind of conflict, where exactly is the battlefield? Well, here's the thing. You can't find it on any map. It's invisible, it's digital, and it's all around us, all the time. Let's break down what computational power really means in this context. It's not just about having a faster laptop. No. We're talking about using that incredible speed to fuel super advanced AI, to control the fire hose of information, and ultimately to make critical strategic decisions way, way faster than your rivals can. You know, think about it this way. If you can process what's happening in the world, if you can literally process reality, predict the next move, and make your decision before your opponent even grasps the situation, you've already won. That is the ultimate strategic advantage in the 21st century. So this new power structure, it's really built on 3 main pillars. You need artificial intelligence, which is kind of like the brain of the operation. You absolutely need advanced semiconductors, the microchips. That's the muscle, the physical hardware. And then you have to have data control, because data is the fuel that makes this entire engine run. All right, so if this is a war, what are the weapons? Obviously, we're not talking about tanks and missiles. But don't be fooled. These new weapons are every bit as powerful.
So here's the modern playbook. First, you use chip sanctions. You basically starve your opponent of the essential hardware they need. Next, you go for algorithm control. This is huge. It's about influencing the software that runs, well, everything from social media to the stock market. And finally, you aim for network dominance, controlling the physical stuff, the undersea cables and satellites that our entire digital world depends on. And we need to be crystal clear about the intent here. When you hear about new tech restrictions or trade rules, just remember this quote. These are not safety regulations. They are acts of strategic warfare designed to achieve dominance. This is all about playing offense, not defense.
And all of this, the chips, the data, the algorithms, it all boils down to one massive question. Who controls the future? Because this isn't just a competition over technology. It's a fundamental fight to determine who gets to write the rulebook for our society.
The stakes here, well, they couldn't be higher, because the power to control the code, that's the power to shape society itself, to set the rules for our economy, our politics, and maybe even our own perception of reality.
It really makes you think. In a world that is increasingly run by software, the people who write that code are in effect becoming our new lawmakers. So that leaves us with this huge, lingering question. If code is the new law, who are the new lawmakers? And who holds them accountable? That's the challenge we all face in the age of silicon supremacy.